Welcome to the JRPG Canon, the ongoing project to document the first slice of a JRPG, to talk about how and why the game works and what brings it to the conversation about the genre that we all love. Today, I am joined by Bernard, and we will be discussing Live Alive, Live Alive, Live Alive, Live Alive for the Super Nintendo, though both of us...
If only in its original language it were written in a perfectly consistently phonetic writing system, and we could know for sure, but we can't know for sure.
Who knows what those runes at the bottom of the thing are? They're surely not katakana that says it's Live Alive. But although this game was for the Super Nintendo, both of us are playing the modern HD 2D remake, where it's the only place it's officially available in English. So, Bernard, do you have any history with Live Alive?
My history with Live Alive is thinking for a long time, I should play that weird Super Nintendo game Live Alive. It looks real cool. And then they announced that they were remaking it and localizing the remake, and I was like, what? That's awesome! And also it was around that time I was like, oh, they figured out how to make HD 2D look good, because I was not a fan of how the original Octopath Traveler looked. They put too much on it.
Yeah. Octopath 1 had too much on it in one way, and then Triangle Strategy had too much on it in a completely different way. And it wasn't until Live Alive that I thought it looked good. And I think it also looks pretty good in Octopath 2. But it took them a hot second.
It looks good in Octopath 2. It looks good in the Dragon Quest 3 trailer.
Yeah. I have a very similar relationship with Live Alive. I had seen it on ROM sites and stuff growing up a lot, and was like, oh, that looks interesting. I thought it was, because one of the guys was a cowboy, I thought it was all just cowboy. I didn't realize they were all different. And then Live Alive was one of the first games that people said that we should cover on the podcast after they got our whole vibe, and I agree. It's very much our whole spiel from the little bit that I've played. But yeah, other than that, I kind of it was always just in the periphery of my experience, wanting always to get around to it. And now I am very glad that I actually did. So yeah, let's, just because I want more Yoko Shimomura music in my life, we're going to have a brief musical interlude and then talk about the history of this game.
I forgot that Shimomura did the music. It's real good. Shimomura is so good.
So good. All right, so I always had the wrong idea about Live Alive. I always thought that this was a late Super Nintendo RPG that was well beloved, but it was too late to be translated before the N64 came out, so it was skipped and never came out over here. But
there were a lot of Square Enix games like that, but yeah, I'm looking at it now, 1994. That's not too late.
No, it was a full 2 years before the Super NES ended, and it has a very West-friendly concept and script. The director even thought, oh, this is a shoe-in for overseas, but it had a very shitty sales. It only sold 500,000 units in Japan and was considered a big old flop. And so...
Well, that's a shame.
So they were like, oh, we won't be able to bring it over, can't afford a localization. I stand corrected. I thought, as I said, I thought the number sounded wrong. I copied the wrong number. The original sold 270,000 units. The remake sold 500,000.
Okay, because when you said it only sold 500,000 in Japan, I was like, I don't know enough to actually like call you out here, but that sounds pretty good for a Japan-only Super Nintendo game, actually.
Yeah. I copied the remake numbers and not the original numbers. So yeah, it was considered a flop, and so they never brought it over, even though they really thought it would do well over here, because with the sci-fi, the prehistory, and the Wild West all being very Western friendly, you would think it would make it. But so yeah, the game itself was developed by Square Division 5, which is the Final Fantasy team. The game direction was handled by Takashi Tokita, who was the game design lead and scenario writer of Final Fantasy IV. Prior to Final Fantasy IV, he was the sprite designer for other Final Fantasy games, and in an interview with FinalFantasy.com for the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy IV, he said that he gave life to all the characters himself and essentially implemented the characters' movements to match the dialogue at the same time, so it feels almost as if he acted out each scene personally. And with the added sprite fidelity of the Super Nintendo, the Final Fantasy IV team came up with the idea to give characters some generic animations that could be able to fit into multiple situations, and which I think is interesting because that's how JRPGs have done it ever since then. Like you'll get a like FMVs, but then all the other cutscenes are just canned animations that strung together well can do so much with it. With Final Fantasy IV, they hit the space limitations of the 16 megabit cartridge, so they had to cut down the dialogue in the game by around 75%. But because they had the more sprite fidelity, they added a bunch of animations that could be smaller than all those lines of text, but could be used in multiple places to tell a story without words, such as a downward glance that could show sadness or thoughtfulness or shame without having to give dialogue to it. So Final Fantasy IV is the first game that had sprite acting, and it was developed on purpose. It was really, really good at it, and it was basically invented by Tokita, who went on to direct this game.
Well, that rules.
Yeah. His next two games directing are Live Alive and Chrono Trigger. And Chrono Trigger also has some of the best sprite acting like ever. And I think that he just hit it out of the park. His first 3 times trying it was kind of insane. Live Alive itself was created to hone in on this more thoughtful, feelings-focused way of telling stories that was possible with these increased sprite animations. And to further that, he wanted to focus on a diverse set of stories with a diverse set of characters who come to life with their animations. But the game is not just made by Tokita, and the sprites are not the only cool and interesting thing about it. The character designer for all of the lead characters was a different mangaka. They wanted them all to look distinct from each other and feel completely apart, so they hired a different person to do each one, which I haven't heard of happening again until Xenoblade 2, which I think is pretty cool.
I do love how in Xenoblade 2 they were just like, yeah, we're just gonna get everyone we can find to do one, and it was great.
It was so good. The music, as you mentioned earlier, was made by Yoko Shimomura, and this was actually her first RPG score. She had quit Capcom and came over to Square, but at Capcom she had done like Street Fighter 2 and Final Fight and a bunch of other like fighting games, and this one they're like, oh, here, do an RPG, and now she's one of the foremost RPG composers of all time, which I think is pretty cool.
She did apparently do a track for Breath of Fire while at Capcom. But yeah, as far as I can tell, it looks like you're correct. This was her first, like, she's doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later would go on to do Mario RPG. Then a couple years later, Parasite Eve. Mm-hmm. And then Kingdom Hearts, Mario and Luigi, and just everything.
Yeah, Parasite Eve is actually after Chrono Trigger, Tokita's next work, and you can really tell off his future discography, filmography, gameography, whatever. Because we got Live Alive after, it kind of feels like, oh, these all inspired Live Alive, but it's actually vice versa, and so it's like a reverse deconstruction of Live Alive. So Chrono Trigger already mentioned, Parasite Eve 1 and 2, The Bouncer.
Directed Final Fantasy The Four Heroes of Light.
Oh yeah, and doing The Four Heroes of Light was the first time he worked with Team Asano, and he has been working with them in a not so official capacity. Like I think on credits on Moby Games, it just shows him as special thanks. But in interviews, he says that he's been working with Team Asano for the past forever. And so Octopath is obviously inspired by Live Alive. And then conversely, Live Alive Remake was inspired by Octopath, bringing it all full circle. Since the original game didn't come over to the West, the fan translation group, Aeon Genesis, translated the game, and wildly, never seen it happen before, in an interview with GamerBraves.com, Tokita name-checked Aeon Genesis and mentioned that seeing that overseas fans were so passionate about the game that wanted to go and get it translated themselves, that it gave him hope of a remake for Live Alive, and he tried to get one off the ground many times during the 30 years between the original release and the Switch release, like pointing at it, being like, no, I promise it'll sell over there. These people love it so much they translated it themselves. And
that's awesome.
You basically never see creators talking about fans translations at all. They don't want to deal with all of the crap of it. But he absolutely was like, no, they're awesome, and they're the reason why this remake got made. And it is this new remake that we have played this time, so we're going to listen to some more Yoko Shimomura music and then talk about this game's opening slice.
Well, opening slice is a complicated idea for this game.
Absolutely. This game, when you load it up, you don't just start playing, it asks you to pick a chapter, and each chapter is defined by a time period. There's the distant future, the near future, the twilight of Edo Japan, the present day, prehistory, Wild West, and Imperial China. You could technically pick any of them, but because I'm kind of aware of this game's whole deal, I'm going to specifically pick the two shortest chapters to talk about, because playing multiple chapters is obviously the vibe of this game.
Well, you say the two shortest, but I think present day is supposed to be way shorter than the others, but it's also apparently like the least interesting one, so we decided to do different ones.
Awesome. I haven't played that one yet, so I'm excited to be led down.
I haven't played it either, but I'm definitely going to play the rest of the chapters, because this game rules, it turns out.
Mm-hmm. So the first one we're starting with is Prehistory. The chapter is really cool because it doesn't have any dialogue, so it's pure Tokita sprite acting, and in the remake, the voice actors just do grunts to go along with the sprite acting, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, did we mention that the remake has voice acting?
I don't think we did, but yeah, the remake is voice acted, and it's done really well.
Yeah, of course, we don't get much in this chapter, but the other chapter we're going to talk about has really good voice acting.
Yeah. So we see. So I wrote these notes as I was playing, which I almost never do. You would think I would more often, especially on this sub-series where it's kind of important, but I almost never do. But I will get some things wrong here and then realize my wrongness later. So don't send in your comments until afterwards. If I end on something wrong, then you can yell at me. So we see several scenes at the beginning of what seems to be the daughter of the chief being kidnapped, and the chief wants people to go and find her. And meanwhile, the princess escapes from the culprits, which seem to be a different clan of cavemen. So a hot guy caveman goes after her.
It's so funny. He's like with the sprite acting and stuff, they're clearly establishing him as a pretty boy caveman, which is such a concept.
It's so good. Then we get the title card, which I forget what it is. I didn't write it down. It's prehistory and then Dawn of a New World or something underneath it. Then during the opening credits, there's a comedic scene of our hero getting chased by mammoths before it asks us to name him. I left him at the default, which is Pogo. Pogo wakes up in his cave and his Donkey Kong looking friend Gory is still snoozing, and he wakes up if you either speak to him or try and leave without him. The game lets us explore around from here, and there's a whole lot of NPCs, and all of the NPC quote-unquote dialogue is awesome because it's just sprite acting, and all of them have different personalities that come up when you talk to them despite not having any lines of dialogue. Another cute thing is the context button when it pops up asking you to do something doesn't have any words in it because Pogo can't speak. So it's just ... for either examine or check or speak or anything like that, which is a cute touch. We're told by one of the NPCs to go look for a bearded man over that way. So we head there. On the way, we can find an item crafter to create new items from the materials we have. This has come up in both of the chapters, and it's real basic where you can just put two things together. But in Pogo's case, all of the combinations I could come up with worked. There wasn't any like failed thing, which is pretty cool. That there's a bunch of options that you can put in here.
And you might get lucky and find something really fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
Which hopefully you do, because this chapter is very combat heavy, and the combat system is no joke.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Me too. We make our way to the bearded man, which is neither of the bearded men from the opening. And he mentions that it's time to hunt, and everybody heads outside. Outside, we're introduced to Pogo's special ability, which is his sense of smell. When we press the action button, we can discover scent clouds, which we can go to get into not technically random battles, and that's the aforegrunted hunting. So when we get to the battle system, it's weird. It's basically a lunar/trail situation where you have a small tactics grid that you fight instance random battles on, but the turn order is kind of mystery dungeony. The active time bar only ticks when actions happen, such as walking around and stuff. So hypothetically, on your turn, you could walk forever, but then everyone else would get turns whenever they're ATB filled. The basic idea is to watch out for the ATBs of monsters and be out of their reach whenever it's their turn, and otherwise move close and do your attacking. It is
also one thing that I find really interesting about it is that if someone gets knocked out, you can use any healing thing to revive them. However, if they get knocked out, they can still be attacked, and if they take damage after being knocked out, they're removed from battle permanently, which is just a unique way to do it.
Yeah, it's rough is what it is.
Yeah, it can be rough. You got to be on your toes.
Mm-hmm. So after hunting, we go to turn in for the night, and when Pogo awakes, Gory is missing. You follow his scent to the kitchen, of course, and who else is there but the daughter of the chief-looking girl from the beginning. We have to do a few things to get her to talk to us, and the game kind of sucks at this part. In both of the chapters, they kind of don't do good at telling you what to do. There's no grunting, pointing, thought bubbles, or anything, but the several times the thing to do is to try and talk to her. She won't do anything, so you leave the room, then immediately come back in and try again. The remake has a radar on the bottom, and I'm glad that I left it on. It kind of trivializes a lot of things on figuring out where to go, but I don't care, because sometimes the place where to go is stupid, and I would have been searching this entire cave forever trying to find something to do besides just walking immediately right back in. Eventually, we steal her some meat from the kitchen, and she comes back with us to our room, and Pogo is smitten by her. When we wake up the next morning, the guy that we stole the meat from is pissed at us for stealing meat, and the daughter of the chief is hungry again and won't talk to us until we get her more meat, but we can't steal any from the kitchen this time, so we have to go outside and hunt to get some more. We fight some more battles and get some meat and bring it back to her, and then honestly, I'm not sure what this cutscene means, but the waypoint points us towards outside again. But when we get there, the hot caveman and his lackeys come in. They kidnap the daughter of the chief, but Pogo accidentally steals one of their Flintstone cars and frees her. The hot caveman then threatens to take her from us, but we won't let him, so we get a fight. Finally, in the fight, the daughter of the chief joins us, so we can learn her name is Baru from the menu. After we beat his cronies, the hot caveman decides to give it a shot, so we get a boss fight. And at this moment is when I realized that after every battle, they heal you to full. I thought at first it might just be healing you at level, because basically everyone has leveled up in every fight so far, but it is after every fight they heal you to full, so the battles can be a little harder.
Yeah. And they're serious business battles.
Yeah. Even random mobs. I think I got 3 game overs from just mammoths outside in this chapter.
Yeah, in this game, sometimes you gotta know when to run.
So the hot caveman battle is pretty hard, but I was able to take him down. He has counters and big AoEs and status effects, which kind of messed up my plans a whole lot and made me have to actually learn about positioning and stuff like that. But after the last battle, Baru had learned a heal spell at level up, so it wasn't terribly hard. Despite us beating the hot caveman and running him out of there, the elder doesn't want us to keep Baru because it's not safe for the clan. Pogo begs to stay, but the elder says, in that case, I'm going to kick all 3 of you out, Pogo, Baru, and Gory, and they throw us out of the cave, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Eventually, we find a cave to sleep in for the night, but we don't realize that it's Hot Caveman's cave, and after we fall asleep, they return and kidnap Baru again. Due to shenanigans, Gory is knocked out, so Pogo has to fight Hot Caveman alone. He's hard, and I got a game over this at this point, and I was scared when that happened because I hadn't saved in forever. But thankfully, in the remake, there's an autosave at every load zone, so that saved my ass. I definitely probably would have just given up. He has the same counters and AoE as before, and Pogo has a knockback attack, so the goal this time is to hit him so that he flies to a place that puts you out of harm's reach, and that's at least what you're supposed to be doing, and I instead ate like 40 hunks of meat to survive because I was bad at it. After the fight, the hot caveman runs away, and he closes the cave door before Pogo can catch him. I'm guessing in-universe would be rolling a rock in front of it, but it just looks like a door closes in the game.
There's some things about this chapter which are weird, like the cars that you mentioned. They have cars.
So Gory wakes up, and he helps bust us out of the cave by throwing Pogo at the door. And, I mean, if it works, it works. But on the other side of the door, Hot Caveman has been preparing for this, and he left a pit trap for Pogo to fall down into before him and his cronies can escape with Baru and their Flintstone cars. I had skipped it earlier because it was played for just laughs, but earlier when Pogo was dreaming, when we went to sleep, he was in a huge field of flowers frolicking with Baru. So now, after falling in the pit, Pogo wakes up in that same field of flowers, but this time we get to walk around. I was like, oh, is this going to be like a thing? Does Pogo have some sort of dream walking powers? Is this where like it twists on its head? And after a while, you find Baru, but she's not responding. So Pogo runs up to her, and it's Gory in a pink wig. It was played for laughs again. I was completely wrong. But Pogo wakes up at the bottom of the pit with Gory, who had jumped down with him after he fell. You bust out of the pit and chase after Hot Caveman. But when we get to the the stronghold of the other cavemen who are called the Ku. So I'm just going to call them Ku from now on. Gory sees something that makes him all hot and bothered, and he runs into the stronghold without you. You have to do a couple solo fights against like huge waves of Ku warriors, but by this point you have 2 giant AoEs at your disposal, and you can win against like 6 or more guys in less than 2 turns, because they aren't any stronger than when we fought them before, but we definitely are. Inside we find what Gory had saw, and it was a bunch of female Neanderthals that look a lot like him, and so now he has a harem of cuties, and Pogo convinces Gory and all of his honeys to rejoin the party and push on forward. When we get to the interior of the compound, I realized that I was very wrong. Baru is not the daughter of a chief, but rather a virgin sacrifice, and the chief was in fact the leader of the Ku, wanting to sacrifice her to some big monster. And it kind of works like a twist because of how vague the storytelling is. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think, oh, I'm stupid and I got everything wrong. I was like, oh, I was tricked by the game, because all of the NPC cavemen have the same sprites. They're just palette swapped. So it was unclear that the cavemen in the first scene were in fact the same ones as the ones in the second. The Ku chief has Baru tied to a pyre, and the cavemen all begin chanting as Pogo and Gory run in. We call out to Baru, and the chief hides cowardly behind her pyre, but then Hot Caveman threatens us and challenges us to another one-on-one battle. As we're about to defeat him, there's a giant pounding, which causes the platform that we're on to fall into the depths of the chasm below, with the chief and the Hot Caveman coming down with us. As we come to, the chief runs off, and after some gruesome noises, the chief's crown is tossed back at us, followed by a large dino roar. But Pogo is a hero, and he doesn't afraid of anything, so he runs at the giant, possessed-looking T-Rex, inspiring Hot Caveman to join with us in the fight against it. This T-Rex is called Odo in the menu, and he's really hard. Mm-hmm. He laser focused on Baru, killing her permanently on his second turn before he could do anything to get her back alive. But Hot Caveman still has his strong ass lizard move that he used in all the fights with us, and there's no MP in this game, so I could just spam it over and over again, and it did like 1/8 of the T-Rex's health. So Pogo and Gory's jobs were to distract Odo for 8 turns so that Hot Caveman could eventually take him down. I could have learned Hot Caveman's name in this battle, but I forgot to, so he's Hot Caveman for the rest of the game. After defeating Odo, we run out of the cave and the credits roll. Under the credits, Hot Caveman becomes Hot Chief, and Hot Chief and the Elder from Pogo's clan decide to join their clans together in a big dancing celebration. Then after the credits, Pogo and Baru fuck, and Gory has an orgy with the Neanderthal girls.
And they all lived happily ever after.
Yes. The game then asks you to save your chapter clear data and takes you back to the chapter select scene where Pogo's icon is now sparkly and golden. So the next one we're going to do is another short one, The Wild West, which is conveniently the next one in the list. So the chapter starts with the sheriff of the town posting up a wanted poster for some unsavory character. That is our character, of course. His default name is the Sundown Kid, aka Sundown.
Pretty good name.
Yeah. When I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't come up with anything better than that. So we meet up with Sundown out in the wilderness, where he comes across Mad Dog, a bounty hunter who's there to shoot us, which is our first battle. They have a complicated history. It seems like Mad Dog has been chasing after Sundown this whole time, but Sundown is refusing to kill Mad Dog, which pisses Mad Dog off because he's like, if I'm going to lose to you, I don't want to be a laughingstock. I want to at least be dead, but Sundown won't kill him.
Also, you know how sometimes cowboys are gay?
No, these guys are very, very gay.
Yeah. I love it.
So Mad Dog challenges us to a duel, which is our first battle. So Sundown, having a gun, attacks in a asterisk-shaped attack pattern, which has a super long range. But almost everybody, aka exactly everybody in this game, in this chapter, also fights with a gun. So if you line yourself up for a shot, you're required to put yourself in harm's way, which fits the idea of a gun duel really, really well. Similarly, Sundown has a counter move, which shows us how counters work in this game. They have an AoE, so you want to keep your enemies inside of your counter area so that you can get a free attack at them, but that then keeps you in range of their attacks. So there's a lot of risk-reward balance in this chapter, which is good because there's, I think, exactly 4 battles in this chapter.
Yeah, you really don't do a lot of combat in this chapter. We talked about doing these 2 chapters just because they're short, but I think they complement each other well because the first one was lots of combat and mechanics. This one is very much more plot and just living in a area and seeing what it's like there.
After we beat him, Mad Dog begs for us to kill him and not just walk away again, but Sundown gets on his horse. Mad Dog starts to get on his to chase him, but Sundown shoots the feet of the horse, causing it to run off and leaving Mad Dog alone in the desert. Back in time, the remake at least does something that makes me think HD2D wasn't a mistake, and it moves the camera, which is a pretty low bar in modern game, but it used traditional Western movie charts. It used traditional Western movie shots with pixel art objects, which rules so fucking hard. Sundown makes his way into the saloon, which is the same one that we saw at the beginning of the game, where Sundown's wanted poster is posted. Everyone is afraid to talk to Sundown and keeps their head down. And when Sundown goes to order a drink, an outlaw named Pike comes in and starts causing trouble for the barmaid Annie, the town scamp Billy, ending up with a confrontation with Sundown where we kick his ass with a single bullet. It's with Mad Dog, it's like 3 or 4 turns you have to survive, and it's using your basic attack, not even any of your special moves. You kill Pike instantly in 1 second. This endears him to the townspeople because Pike is a member of the Crazy Bunch, aka the Wild Bunch. It's the influences for this chapter are worn directly on its sleeve. And the Crazy Bunch has a gang. They're a gang of outlaws who have the town under their control, a la Seven Samurai, a la A Bug's Life,
a la any of the westerns inspired by Seven Samurai.
Yes. The Magnificent Seven and the Ridiculous Six, and probably others.
I just love how samurai and western stuff is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's a thing in like biology that happens where like evolution for certain species kind of can happen at the same time in completely different areas, like in
convergent evolution.
No, so not like everything becomes a crab, but in Australia they had traditional cattle guards to keep their sheep in one area, but one group of sheep learned how to balance so they could just get over the cattle guards and escape. So on the complete other side of Australia, sheep started doing the same thing like within a year of each other, despite being completely separated. And so I think that cowboys are cool and samurais are cool happening at around the same time is 100% that happening with humans. So the townspeople all think that Sundown might be the person that they've been waiting for to help them take care of the Wild Bunch. But then Mad Dog comes in and he tells everyone that Sundown is in fact the Sundown Kid, and that Mad Dog is there to collect his bounty, and he challenges Sundown to a duel. They stand back to back outside and they take their 5 paces, but instead of turning to shoot each other, they shoot some of the Wild Bunch who are in hiding outside. The townspeople ask Sundown and Mad Dog to join forces with them to help them with their whole Crazy Bunch problem. and Mad Dog agrees to postpone their duel until after they help out the town. Back inside the saloon, the sheriff informs us that the Wild Bunch's leader is the sole survivor of the Battle of Greasy Grass, more commonly known as the Battle of Little Bighorn, even more commonly known as Custer's Last Stand. Bizarrely referred to here as Custer's 7th, in reference to the 7th Cavalry, who Custer led into the battle in the real world, and they were all killed in the fighting in the real world. I had done this in my notes as a cute little historical aside because I know too much shit about Westerns, but it actually comes up later. The leader of the Wild Bunch, Dio, survived, and the 15 members of the Wild Bunch flock to him, and they follow his every order.
Dio sounds a lot like Odo. I wonder if that will be a thing in all these chapters.
Mad Dog says that the only way we can win when we're so outnumbered is to lay traps and ambush, and he asks the townspeople for their help. Reluctantly, they all agree, and they name Sundown the temporary sheriff for some reason.
Because the current sheriff sucks ass.
He does. He's definitely been licking the boots of the Wild Bunch, and Townscamp Billy is his son, and he hates his dad for being a coward.
There's lots of really good characterization and stuff happening pretty much all the time in this game, in this chapter at least. But going into all the details of it would be a bit much.
Yeah, I had done a play-by-play of the earlier scene with Pike, which goes on for a hot minute, but at the end of all of it, I was like, yeah, he causes trouble. There's too much just getting bogged down on the little bits that make it important to try and give the play-by-play, because a lot of it is so character-focused. So I'm truncating it down to the basic gist, but there's a lot here. So now the game does a pretty cool thing. The Wild Bunch will show up in 8 hours, and you have to decide how you're going to spend those 8 hours preparing for them to show up. You can go out and gather items to make traps, and then enlist the townspeople to make those traps. There are a bunch of empty chests and dead ends in the town to waste your time finding items, but I was able to find every item and get every trapped place with like an hour and a half to spare, so it's not a very tight deadline at all.
Yeah, I of course don't actually know what the optimal solution is, but I feel like I got it the best as possible.
Yeah.
Maybe if I had been really clever or found something really hidden, I could have, because when I fought them, there were like 14 people or whatever are going to come to town, and I ended up just fighting Odio and 2 henchmen. Maybe I could have gotten those last 2 henchmen too. I don't know. I
got the Odio and 1 henchman, so probably you could get rid of all of the henchmen. I can't imagine what that fight is like if you suck and have to fight 15 plus Odio.
I mean, I imagine it's split up into multiple battles. I would hope so. Yeah. Because just fighting Odio and 2 henchmen is really hard.
Really, really hard. So after the 8 hours, the sun comes up and in comes the Wild Bunch in a really, really cool Western-inspired camera shot of them coming up over the edge in front of the sun up, which is so classic.
There's a really weird scene where a kid and his grandfather are walking into town, and I was like, oh no, are they going to set off the traps that we just set up and get killed? But no, they don't get killed by our traps. They get killed by the Wild Bunch.
Yay.
Well, the grandfather gets killed, and the kid runs off.
Yeah. The Wild Bunch, when they come into town, they all get blown up or thrown off their horse or get horned up for a poster of a girl we left out. And it's all very satisfying to watch them all get picked off. The few that survive tell Sundown and Mad Dog to come outside, and away we go. Outside, Odio is a large man with a Gatling gun. And he thanks Sundown for teaching his followers how to wage war, and he will repay him in their common currency, blood and lead and death. He is real hard. He's kind of the epitome of the idea that everyone in this chapter fights with a gun, so everyone can shoot in straight lines. So do not be standing in one of the 8 ordinal directions, because his fuck you move hits for easily double your HP, and he'll do it twice real fast. killing Mad Dog before Mad Dog even had a turn. Both of my attempts fighting this boss, Mad Dog was dead immediately.
What I like here is that because you don't have any opportunity to grind in this chapter, so you just got to deal with it. But the combat system is weird enough and complicated enough, and you have all these special moves and stuff that you can try out different things, and eventually you'll figure something out.
Yeah. Because this is a Super NES game, his battle sprite is a huge Chongus.
I love it.
And so you can position yourself where if you shoot diagonally, you can shoot to his the back of his sprite, which won't be counted as on his shooting diagonal from his gun. So with careful positioning and trying to stay in that little sliver, I was able to take him down in my second try. Interestingly, Odio, whose name is very similar to the T-Rex's name of Odo, he also has a big red possession swirl in battle. And after we kill him, that possession energy dissipates and he turns back into a horse?
Yeah.
So, turns out that Custer's 7th Cavalry did get wiped out at the Battle of Gracie Grass, and only one Union horse survived, which is how they knew, oh shit, we lost because this horse came home. And as far as Annie can tell, the souls of those fallen colonizer soldiers must have attached themselves to the horse and turned it into death itself. We know that Odo was around in the prehistory, so that's probably not true, but thematically makes sense. The townspeople thank Sundown and refer to him as Stranger, implying that they will deny seeing him since he's a wanted man. But Mad Dog says, no way, we've got a duel to do. So we have another fight, and we still kick Mad Dog's ass. This time, seemingly for good, he falls into the dirt. The townspeople see Sundown off and offer to pay him, but he refuses. He says it's been a long time since he was able to do something good, so that was reward enough for him. As he runs off, the realization dawns on the townspeople, and they recognize that Sundown used to be a sheriff, but after the Wild Bunch laid waste to his town, he went out into the wilderness and posted his own bounty so that greedy people and the Wild Bunch would seek him out to try and get his bounty, and one by one he could make amends for the town that he couldn't save by taking them out. And so it was his fight against the Wild Bunch that taught the Wild Bunch how to fight, and that's what Odio was referring to earlier.
Very pulling a backstory out of nowhere at this point, and it's just like, y'all knew that this was a thing and it didn't occur to you this might be that guy before. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, especially the moment when he came in and was like, you know what? I'm not going to be an outlaw and kill everybody. I'm going to help everybody out. They should have been like, maybe he's the nice guy and not the outlaw that's on the poster. With that, the credits roll in this chapter, and we see a couple of the townspeople hanging out. Don't really do anything interesting. And after the credits roll, we're taken back to the chapter select screen, and that is the core loop of this game. You play separate stories, all have something to do with Odio, and each have their own twist on the gameplay and some sort of spin on the RPG formula. So we're going to listen to some more of Yoko Shimomura's music, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So, I am torn on if I like the prehistory chapter. Sprite acting is awesome, and it's my favorite, but because there was no dialogue, there was no time for you to have to press A to make it keep going, so it makes things really easy to miss and makes your attention easy to wander. And if you walk into a room and you are greeted with the loading screen, so you look away to do something, on the other end of the loading screen, if it's a cutscene, there's nothing to warn you until it's too late and you've missed some things. And
I would simply pay attention.
Yeah, don't know how to do that. But I've mentioned it before, and I don't know if it was on mic or just talking to all of my RPG friends, but pressing a button to get to the next line of dialogue is a critical thing that makes RPGs different from reading a book or watching a movie. It requires input to make the thing happen. And RPGs having voice acting these days kind of has removed that, and it's pretty much my least favorite thing about modern games. You can, at least in modern games, pause cutscenes, which you can't in this game, so that helps, but it just trucking along, you kind of lose some of the magic. That's why games like Higurashi, where there's no interactivity beyond the button press, I still say count as a video game, because the style of storytelling that's going text box to text box, and only getting that next bit of story by pressing a button is something that only can work in a video game. So even though Higurashi could technically just be a light novel, it's not. And the things that it uses video game for are uniquely video game, even though interactively you're just pressing the A button for 40 hours. And so not having that in Prehistory made it pretty rough. And I'm sure that beyond the things that I obviously got wrong, I probably got other things wrong, because it was a little hard to follow because you had to have laser focus on the screen the whole time.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you got something wrong with Prehistory. It's intentionally vague and weird. Mm-hmm. I mainly just really enjoyed the Prehistory for all the combat we got to do. Every time you learn a new gross super move for one of your boys, it's really exciting. Figuring out good strategies and doing the crafting. It's all real fun.
Yeah. I really like how they invented a bunch of reinvented a bunch of RPG staples without any text boxes. Like the shop in particular made me smile, where he's just grunting at different options, and then you pick by pointing left or right. There's a lot of really cool stuff. One of the NPCs that I mentioned earlier is a grumpy guy. When you go to him, he like grunts something that basically feels like "leave me alone," and he walks away from you. But if you keep following him, turns out he just had to fart, and he didn't want to fart in front of you. But since you chased him, he farts anyways, and it's a huge fart that fills the whole screen, and it's funny, and you get personality from the caveman, even though it's juvenile, and I really like it.
Pop culture sure liked doing caveman stuff in the 90s.
It's kind of weird how many caveman things there were in the 90s. I don't know where that comes from. I've looked at it before because I was looking up something about, I think Bonk. I was like, why is everything caveman? And no one really knows. Just everybody was a caveman. Guessing based on this one, it might be because cavemen didn't talk, so you didn't need a lot of text, so you could just make a game about a caveman and it'd be okay that none of the story made any sense and really did a lot of things.
Also, I mean, if you're going to be doing this game with lots of different time periods, doing one in prehistory is a fun idea.
Mm-hmm. Another bit of the sprite acting that I really liked in this one is in the prehistory chapter is one of Hot Caveman's cronies keeps getting the short straw because they only have enough Flintstone cars for their group -1, and so he keeps getting left behind and has to chase after him. And then at the end, when Baru is captured for the final time, he's just running behind the cars, doing the same sort of like formations and everything that the cars are, just has given up on getting his own car, and he's just running behind it, and it's really cute. As for the Wild West chapter, I really, really liked the positioning battle that the gunplay was. I would probably play a full RPG with just this sort of thing, which, I mean, there is Wild Arms XF, which is probably similar, so I'll report back if that's the same thing. But it was, it felt like chess in a way that tactics games rarely do. Like, the shooting pattern is basically the pattern of a queen in chess, and you can only move like a king, just one square at a time. Well, not even like a king. Kings can move diagonally. You can't even do that. And so it's rough being able to only move one square at a time while they can threaten almost the entire board.
Yeah, I guess there isn't a chess piece that can move like a... I guess you move like a fucked up rook.
Yeah. I also really liked the idea of building all the traps and setting up the town, although I wish it had more to it. With all of the planning I did, I still had, like I said, an hour and a half left at the end. I probably didn't get it completely correctly. I also guessed that I did, but seeing that you had 2 and I had 1 makes me think there probably is a way to only have none of them left. But it would have been cool to like decide where to place them or some other way of doing all the things.
I mean, there's lots of like you find items that are hidden items. You give certain items to certain people in a certain order, but you really can't dig too deep into it just by the nature of you've only got one shot at this. It's not like you're going to be setting up traps multiple times with these characters.
Yeah. And
so you just sort of do your best, and it's a fun challenge for FAQ writers.
Yeah. But overall for the game, I really like the concept of an anthology RPG, and I wish that there were more of them. Thankfully, we have Octopath nowadays, and I think that a lot of the sagas are like this, but I don't know if either of the modern ones are. I know some of the PS1 games are like this, but I haven't looked at Scarlet Grace or Emerald Beyond yet. But
I was really surprised because you tell me anthology RPG, every section is going to be like 2 hours. I'm expecting, it's going to be really interesting, fun storytelling, but I'm not expecting to get really deep into the mechanics and really enjoy that, because usually when you think of a JRPG, the mechanics are interesting in a long form way. Where you're building up your characters over time and stuff. But the battle system is just so good, and you have all these interesting abilities that you've got to figure out how best to use. I loved the mechanics of this game.
Yeah. It was surprisingly deep for basically just starting over all the time. But I really liked the idea of JRPG short stories. And because like a lot of the other ones we've played this season are all short, like 4-hour JRPGs, but they all make their mechanics kind of nothing, where it doesn't really matter. But here the mechanics still matter, and it still makes a compelling JRPG short story, which I think is really cool.
And since it's going to be a bunch of short stories with similar mechanics, they can make the mechanics more complicated, because even though your progression isn't carrying from prehistory to Wild West, if you get pretty comfortable with how the systems work in prehistory, then when Wild West comes up, hopefully you have a better knack for moving your characters around and figuring out the positioning and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And on the list on your save file, prehistory is listed first. So I wonder if it was choosing it in a list on the Super NES, if that one was listed first to help people go in and do a combat heavy one to get used to the combat there, to then be able to do riffs on it for all the others. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it definitely seemed that way. If there's one takeaway I would take from this game, it's that none of the pieces of the JRPG are sacred and have to be present to make a JRPG. Does it need a deep story with magic and weapons? It doesn't. Pogo didn't need it. Does it need exploration, battles, levels, gold? No. Sundown didn't need it. But both of these chapters were undeniably JRPG, meaning that deep down, I think that RPG is just a vibe more than a checklist of items. And this season has been filled with a bunch of anti-RPGs, games that either riff on or twist the RPG formula. But this one does that same thing, but isn't an anti-RPG. When putting it in the season, I was like, oh yeah, this one riffs on it. It's one of the first games that did it. But playing it, it didn't riff on JRPG. It just was a JRPG, despite dropping whole cloth a lot of things that make JRPGs. And that's kind of really cool. But yeah, I think that's the bottom line, is this game is kind of really cool. And I think every chapter separately deserves to go into the JRPG canon. I haven't played 5 of them, so the other 5 could suck, and I'll take it back in just these 2. But each one, with the way that it plays with how it works and all of that stuff, makes it really, really interesting to play. And I definitely think if you are wanting to make a JRPG, playing this whole game to look at all the different ways that it does its things is probably really helpful. Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up, Bernard?
I just want to say, in the Wild West chapter, before you go to do your whole thing where you find the items and it's timed and everything, Mad Dog says, with really good voice acting, remember this moment, save the memory if you take my meaning, in case it all goes sideways. And I was like, I love it. I love it. I'll save the memory.
The voice acting in general in this remake is fantastic. When you're telling people where to go, every single time Sundown's like, need you to lay a trap. And then Mad Dog's like, what kind of trap are you thinking? And it's the same thing like 15 times. It's so good. But yeah, I think that'll do it for this episode. If you'd like to sponsor a JRPG Canon episode, you can do so on the web at www.rpgbook.club. It should be an RPG, but the definition of RPG and how canon it is can be up to you. As we saw here, RPG is just a vibe. So as long as it fits into the vibe, I can spin it as an entry into the JRPG canon. Besides commissioning an episode, you can also just make a donation, and any and all donations will help us cover the cost of running the show and making it better and better. If you set up a recurring monthly donation, you also get some additional benefits. If you donate $1 more a month, you get access to our bonus feed, as well as access to our polls that decide what game we play next on the main feed. If you donate $5 or more a month, we'll also shout out your name at the end of every episode, like this. Shoutouts to Cerebral Wind, It's Claire Time, Frosthair, Dragon Slayer 19, Floris, Kildron, Freddy Rodriguez, Aaron524, and JFro Prime. And finally, if you love us so much and you want to donate $20 or more a month, you also get to make me say a sentence of your choosing, either to plug something or just to make me say something in a certain order. Shoutouts to El Tantavi, who wants you to check out Aftermath.site, a worker-owned, reader-supported news site covering video games, the internet, and the cultures that surround them. And then shoutouts to Vimk, who wants you to play Legend of Legaia, a game that, in their heart, is the only entry on the JRPG canon. And then shoutouts to Carr, who's a dentist, so he isn't plugging a website, but rather your own mouth, and he says to brush your teeth twice a day, most importantly, the time before you go to bed. For the JRPG canon, I've been Sam Allman.
I'm Bernard.
Go play some games.